I never planned to become the kind of man who questions every detail of his marriage, every shift in tone, every late-night text tone that echoes through the dark. For 10 years, my wife and I had built something I believed was steady, honest, and even enviable to some. But trust is a fragile thing, and sometimes it doesn't break in a dramatic moment. It decays quietly, like a rope worn thin strand by strand, until one day it gives way with a snap that feels sudden only because you didn't notice the slow unraveling. My name is Daniel. I'm 41. And if you had asked me a year ago, I would have sworn that my wife, Rebecca, loved me in a way that felt unshakable. She always had this way of smiling, slightly crooked. Soft, like she was letting me into a secret world nobody else got to see. But that look had been fading for months. I noticed, even if I tried to pretend I didn't. Rebecca worked in corporate event planning for a tech company. It meant trips: Seattle, Denver, Miami, San Diego. Nothing unusual. She'd been traveling for years. But sometime last spring, those trips started to feel different. Longer. More frequent. More excuses. More vague explanations about delayed flights and exhausting back-to-back meetings. I kept telling myself her job was demanding, especially as she was pushing for a promotion. But the truth was, something about her energy had changed. You learn to read your spouse's silence better than their words. One Wednesday morning, she told me she needed to fly to Charlotte for a 3-day conference. Something about the way she said it, too light, too rehearsed, made my stomach twist. I told myself it was nothing. Everyone gets paranoid sometimes. Still, I asked a basic question: who's going with you this time? She froze. Not much, just enough for someone who'd known her half his life to notice. Just the usual team, she said, but her eyes didn't match her voice. A small thing. Tiny. But marriages are built on thousands of tiny things, and sometimes they're also destroyed by them. She left Thursday morning. Kissed my cheek quickly, like she was late. Like being near me made her nervous. When the door closed behind her, the house felt hollow. Without really knowing why, I walked into the kitchen, pulled out my phone, and checked her location. We had it shared for safety since years ago. Except, hers was turned off. First time in months. I tried to brush it off, but my mind was already spiraling. By noon, I knew I wasn't going to get anything done at work. I'd be useless, staring at my phone, waiting for some sign of normalcy. Instead, I did something impulsive. Something I'd never done before. I booked a flight to Charlotte. A surprise visit. A romantic gesture, I told myself. Something sweet. Something movies are made of. But beneath that layer of optimism was a darker truth I needed to see for myself. Needed to know if my marriage was still a marriage or a ghost I was trying to hold. The flight left at 4 p.m. I didn't text Rebecca. Didn't call. I justified it as wanting to surprise her, but deep down I was afraid. Afraid she'd hear something in my voice. Afraid she'd know. I landed around 8. Rented a car. Drove straight to the hotel she said she'd be staying at, a Hilton downtown. I rehearsed what I'd say at the front desk: I'm surprising my wife. What room is she in? But I never got the chance to say it. Because when I stepped into the lobby, the world seemed to stop. Rebecca wasn't supposed to be there yet. She told me she had a dinner meeting across town. But there she was, walking across the lobby. Laughing. Her hand brushing the arm of a man I'd never seen before. She wasn't startled. She wasn't uncomfortable. She looked happy. Happier than she'd been with me in months. Watching her laugh like that with another man felt like being punched in the chest. I ducked behind a huge pillar, my heart pounding. They walked toward the elevators, still talking, still smiling. He said something that made her tilt her head back and laugh, a sound I hadn't heard directed at me in so long. I pulled out my phone and snapped a photo before I could stop myself. Proof. Evidence. Something solid so I wouldn't gaslight myself later into thinking it was nothing. I followed at a distance, careful, quiet. They stepped into an elevator, and right before the doors closed, the man reached out, tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, and she didn't stop him. Didn't flinch. Didn't pull away. I stood there long after the elevator disappeared, my mind numb, my hands shaking so badly I dropped my phone twice trying to unlock it. I checked her location out of habit. This time, it was on. The little dot blinked from a higher floor. She must have forgotten it had been off. I took the next elevator, my breath shallow, my chest tight. Every floor felt like a lifetime. When I reached her floor, the hallway was empty and painfully quiet. I walked slowly, checking door numbers, following the dot on my screen. Then I heard it. A sound that cracked something inside me. Her laughter. His voice. Their muffled conversation through a door that wasn't fully shut. It was cracked just slightly, the way you might leave it if your hands were full or you were too distracted by the person you were with to care. My first instinct was to run. Leave. Pretend I'd never come. But something made me walk closer, slowly, as if watching my own life fall apart from the outside. I pushed the door gently with my fingertips, and it opened just enough for me to see them in the reflection of the mirror on the wall. He stood behind her, his hands on her waist. She leaned into him like she belonged there. Like the space between them had existed for years. She whispered something I couldn't hear, and he kissed her neck. She didn't resist. She didn't stop him. She didn't say she was married. I didn't need to see more. The truth was already screaming in my ears. I let go of the door. It swung shut with a soft click. And in that moment, everything in my life split into before and after. I walked down the hall, not sure where I was going, only that I had to move. Had to breathe. Had to stay standing long enough to get out of that hotel. When I reached the lobby, my phone buzzed. A text from Rebecca, just finished for the night. So tired. Going to sleep early. Love you. I stared at the message until the words blurred. She didn't even bother to lie creatively. Just copy-pasted her usual checkpoints, as if she were following a script she no longer cared about. I didn't respond. Couldn't. I went to the parking garage, sat in the rental car, and tried to make sense of the tornado in my head. Anger, disbelief, heartbreak, humiliation, they all slammed into me at once, each one taking turns suffocating me. I didn't know what to do or who to call or how to breathe through the pain. I didn't sleep that night. I drove around the city like a ghost, replaying the scene over and over. The way she smiled at him. The way she leaned into him. The way she had once leaned into me. Everything felt surreal, like a nightmare I couldn't wake from. The next morning. I made a decision, not out of impulse this time, but out of desperate clarity. I wasn't going home without the truth. All of it. Every detail she tried to hide. Because the thing about betrayal is that partial truth feels like poison. I needed the full dose. And I knew exactly how to get it. When I boarded the plane, the weight in my chest felt heavier than my carry-on. I kept telling myself I was overreacting, that my mind was stitching together coincidences and turning them into conspiracy. But every time I replayed the last few weeks, the late-night meetings, the business trip she never talked much about, the sudden tension in her voice when I asked simple questions, I felt a quiet, cold certainty spreading under my ribs. It was like my intuition, which I had ignored for so long, was finally screaming loud enough that I couldn't pretend anymore. I landed just after sunset. The city looked peaceful from above, a grid of lights shimmering in the dark, but everything inside me was spiraling. I didn't even check into the hotel. I took a taxi straight to the one she had texted me earlier, the one she claimed the company had booked for her. I remember gripping my phone so tightly my hand went numb, checking her last message again, long day tomorrow. Probably won't be responsive. Love you. I stared at those words long enough to realize something was off. She never wrote love you without adding to. It was stupid, microscopic, but after years together you notice the tiniest fractures. They speak louder than the big ones. I told myself that surprising her would prove everything wrong, that she would open the door, shocked but smiling, throw her arms around me, and laugh at how paranoid I'd been. I clung to that fantasy like someone clinging to a life raft in a storm. When the taxi pulled up to the hotel, I felt my heartbeat climb into my throat. I walked through the lobby with the false confidence of someone pretending he belongs in a place where the truth won't hurt him. The receptionist looked up, friendly and polished. Welcome. Checking in? Actually, I said, trying to sound casual, my wife is staying here. I'm surprising her. Could you give me her room number? She typed something into her computer, paused, and then said, I'm sorry, sir. There's no one registered under that name. The floor didn't drop beneath me. It just tilted. Could you check again? Maybe under her company? She checked. Nothing. I thanked her and stepped aside, my pulse thundering. Maybe she booked under a different name? Maybe the company used a third-party service? Maybe it was all a misunderstanding. I went outside, leaned against a column, and stared at the night sky while my mind tore itself apart. My hands shook as I called her. 1 ring. 2. 3. No answer. I tried again, same thing. I texted her, hey, everything okay? No response. Seconds stretched into minutes. The breeze outside was warm, but I felt frozen. My first instinct wasn't even anger. It was fear. The kind of fear that whispers, you're about to learn something you can't unlearn. I opened our shared location app, the one we hadn't used in months. I didn't expect it to work, but it loaded. And when her dot appeared, it wasn't at the hotel. It wasn't even close. She was across the city. In a completely different district. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the map glowing on my screen, the truth unfurling like smoke inside me. She hadn't told me the wrong hotel. She had lied about the hotel entirely. I got into another taxi and told the driver the address. It was an upscale residential neighborhood, quiet and dimly lit, the kind of place where people walk their dogs in fancy pajamas and pretend their lives are perfect. My throat felt tight as I got out and looked at the building number. Her location placed her on the 4th floor. I didn't storm inside. I didn't run. I walked slowly, as if my body had detached from the panic tearing through my chest. I took the elevator up, each floor dinging like a countdown to detonation. When I reached the 4th floor, the hallway was silent. I followed the dot to the last door on the left. My hand hovered in the air, hovering between knocking and turning the handle and collapsing where I stood. But the universe made the choice for me. Because before I could touch the door, I heard something from inside, soft at first, muffled, but unmistakable. Laughter. A woman's laughter. Her laughter. And then a man's voice, low, close. I felt my vision blur at the edges, a pressure building in my ears. I leaned closer, praying I was wrong, that maybe the TV was on, that maybe she was visiting a coworker, something innocent, something harmless, something that didn't feel like my entire world cracking open. Then I heard it, her voice whispering, soft and intimate, the tone she used to use with me. Followed by a sound I will never forget for as long as I live. A sound that ended the man I used to be. A moan. Hers. And then his. My lungs forgot how to work. My body froze. Time froze. The hallway, the lights, the carpet beneath my feet, all of it dissolved. There was only the door. And the truth shattering through it. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't knock. I just stood there, completely silent, feeling every piece of my reality collapse inside me one by one, like dominoes falling in slow motion. I don't know how long I stayed there. A minute. 5. 10. At some point I realized I couldn't breathe, that I needed to get out before I did something I'd regret forever. I walked away slowly, my heart numb, my mind blank. It wasn't until I stepped outside the building and the cold night air hit my face that I felt the first tear fall. Not from sadness. Not from anger. But from the violent shock of knowing the person you trust most in the world can destroy you in a single moment without even knowing you're close enough to hear it. And that was when something in me hardened. Something I didn't recognize. Something that whispered, "This isn't the end. Not yet. You're going to find out the whole truth. And she won't see it coming." I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I closed my eyes I saw her silhouette in that hotel room, the way she froze when she realized I had finally uncovered the truth, the way her expression shifted from guilt to desperation to something that looked dangerously close to anger. By morning my thoughts were moving in circles, looping the same memories, her late-night calls she claimed were urgent, the sudden business trips, the nights she came home smelling like a perfume I didn't recognize but dismissed because I trusted her more than I trusted my own senses. And somewhere inside that cycle, I felt something breaking, but also hardening, like a wound turning into scar tissue. I knew I needed answers, not half-truths, not her attempts to twist the story, not her tears that kept shifting into accusations as she claimed I invaded her privacy by surprising her. I needed the full truth, even if it shattered the last pieces of our marriage. When I returned home, the house felt wrong. Too quiet, too staged, as if the life we had built together was nothing more than a set prepared for a show that had ended. She appeared in the kitchen the moment I walked in, still wearing yesterday's clothes, like she hadn't moved all night. She looked exhausted, but there was a strange determination in her eyes, the kind she never used when we argued about bills or chores or future plans. This determination was new, heavy, dangerous. "We need to talk," she said, but I walked past her and sat down, letting her feel the weight of my silence. She took a deep breath and started speaking all at once, saying she'd made mistakes, saying she was confused, saying it didn't mean anything. I didn't interrupt, not because I believed her, but because I wanted her to run out of excuses on her own. Eventually she said it. It was only once. A lie so obvious it almost made me laugh. I told her the investigator had already given me the details, the dates, the photos, the messages, everything, and she turned pale, her breath catching in her throat. That moment, the exact second she realized I knew everything, was the moment her entire expression fell apart. She broke down into tears again, begging me to understand, begging me to give us a chance, begging me to believe she didn't want to lose our life together. But something in me had shifted permanently. I wasn't the same person who surprised his wife out of love. I was someone who'd walked into hell expecting a warm welcome. We didn't speak for days after that. She stayed in the guest room, crying often enough that I could hear her through the walls, but not approaching me again. I avoided her, pouring my energy into work, into long drives, into anything that wasn't her. But ignoring a wound never heals it. It festers. And eventually that festering forced me to confront a decision I never wanted to make, whether to try fixing something so deeply broken or to walk away from the life we'd built over a decade. One night she came into the living room where I sat staring at the TV without really watching. She didn't cry this time. She didn't beg. She stood quietly, hands shaking, eyes red, and said, "I want to tell you everything. No lies." I gestured for her to sit, and she did, folding her hands in her lap like a child waiting for punishment. She told me things I wasn't prepared to hear, not because of the details, but because of how easily she had slipped into that other life. She told me she'd been feeling disconnected from us, that she felt like I didn't see her anymore, that the pressure from work made her vulnerable. It was a speech I had heard before from friends who went through their own divorces, the script so predictable it almost numbed me. But then she admitted something that pierced straight through my numbness. It wasn't an accident. I didn't stop it. I chose it. That sentence hit harder than the betrayal itself, because it stripped away every comforting lie, every hope that maybe she'd been manipulated, pressured, confused. No, she made a conscious choice to risk our entire life for someone she barely knew. I asked her why, genuinely wanting to understand, and she said something I still don't fully accept. It made me feel alive again. Alive. As if our marriage had been a long, quiet death. As if the years of effort, love, sacrifices, late-night talks, shared dreams meant nothing in comparison to the thrill of something temporary and forbidden. Something inside me collapsed when she said that. Not with anger, but with realization, a realization that maybe I wasn't losing her, because she'd been gone long before I ever suspected. After that, the process of us falling apart accelerated. I contacted a lawyer. She begged me not to. She tried logic, emotion, threats, promises. She cycled through every tactic a drowning person uses when they realize the shore is gone. She said she'd go to therapy, she'd quit her job, she'd cut off all contact with him. She even tried shifting the blame to my long work hours. But it was too late. None of it mattered anymore. When she realized I wasn't changing my decision, something in her shattered completely. She stopped pretending. The guilt turned into anger, then resentment. She lashed out at me, claiming I was throwing everything away, that I didn't know how to forgive, that I was making a mistake we'd both regret. But I had finally learned something I should have known long ago: loyalty is a choice. Respect is a choice. Betrayal is also a choice. And she had made hers long before I discovered it. The day she moved out, she cried again, standing in the doorway with her suitcase. She said she still loved me, that she always would, that she hoped one day I could forgive her. I didn't respond. I didn't trust myself to. Watching her leave was painful, but it was also liberating, like finally ripping off a bandage that had been keeping an infected wound hidden. The weeks after were strange. Quiet. Heavy. But the quiet was healing, not suffocating. For the first time in months, I could breathe without feeling like I was inhaling glass. I started rediscovering parts of myself I had neglected. Old hobbies. Friends I hadn't seen in years. Moments of peace that didn't come with a warning attached. And while the pain of betrayal didn't disappear, it never fully does, it became something I could carry without collapsing. One evening, months later, she called. I almost didn't answer, but curiosity won. Her voice was tired, softer than I remembered, stripped of the anger and desperation she once used to control the narrative. She said she wanted me to know she was in therapy, that she regretted everything, that she finally understood the depth of the damage she caused. She didn't ask for another chance. She didn't try to come back. She simply apologized, sincerely, for the first time. And maybe that was the closure both of us needed. After we hung up, I sat alone in the quiet of my home and realized something important: betrayal had broken me. But healing was rebuilding me into someone stronger, someone wiser, someone who finally understood his own worth. And as painful as it was, I wasn't the man who walked into that hotel room anymore. I was someone new. Someone free.